Bonjour, my name is Nadine. I'm 17 years old, and I want to tell you my story. Do you remember your first school love and your first time? I thought I wasn't going to get either, but watch this video to the end and learn how the first sex with your best friend can turn your whole life around. Until recently, I hated everyone and everything around me. If it wasn't for Mallory, my best friend, I swear I would have hung myself from the school gate out of boredom. If you look at Mallory and me from the outside, you can never even assume that we've been friends since first grade. You know why? I'm a goody two-shoes. So cute it makes you sick. And she's goth or punk, or even all at once. She was always there to protect me if someone got too aggressive and tried to lay a hand on me. And in junior school, I remember she took me to all the games. She was, of course, our tactic leader, the leader of the class, a real Girl Scout, if you know what I mean. That's why we sometimes fight. We argue so much that sparks fly, almost to a fight, with rage and shouting. Just at the beginning of my story lies one such argument. It was my first time we had a fight in front of everyone. I was just joking that my husband and kids were waiting for me a little bit longer, and all of a sudden, Mallory pushed me against the wall and started yelling at me like even my mother never yelled. Do you have a friend you couldn't live without? Did you argue with her so terribly? If so, you must understand me. I hated Mallory at that moment. I wasn't ashamed of it. My best friend made our fight a joke. I couldn't find the strength to forgive her, even when she apologized. Both that day and later, I needed time to step back and think to calm the chaos in my head. My social circle had previously consisted only of Mallory and her friends. Now it was just me, my mother, and the geek from the parallel with which we were preparing for exams. My mother was always very annoyed with Mallory, and she was insanely conservative, so she forbade Mallory to go near the house. That's why I didn't go out, so she wouldn't be waiting for me at the library. That's how the nerdy Lily got into my bedroom. My mother had no complaints about the mousy girl, which is even mousier than her own daughter. However, I whined to her more about how much I missed my friend than I studied. I missed her terribly. So when Mallory threw a rock at my window in the middle of the night and invited me to the party as if nothing had happened, I gave up and just asked Lily to cover for me. I immediately wished I hadn't come. There was a whole crowd of people I didn't know, and there was no Lily. I had become attached to her in the short days we had been together. But Mallory was always with me, and that was just as well, because I couldn't get enough of my longing for her. My friend first drew me into dancing, then gave me wine, weak and sweet. But I was pleased with how drunk I was. I even agreed to play spin the bottle. A dozen people sat in a circle on the floor. I knew half of them. Almost everyone was either drinking or smoking, laughing loudly and teasing each other. I could feel Mallory's heavy, warm hand on my waist. In the end, something happened that I was a little afraid of. The bottle spun round and pointed the shiny neck at Mallory sitting next to me. She made a joke and turned her whole body to me. I could feel her breath on my cheek, hot and impatient. The kiss was almost the same, as if Mallory had put the last of her rage and all of her love for me into it. Her hands rested on my shoulders, and finally she bit me lightly, her eyes twinklingly mischievously. I came home thinking about my best friend had stolen my first kiss. It was strange, you know? Some new and unusual feeling was growing in my chest like a small flower. You will never believe what it had led me to. Just a couple of days before the exam, my mother left home for the whole day. What would you do at home in case of such a situation? Then you probably already guessed what I was planning. Lily and I were going to hang out, combine a girls' night with study, but I was already doing everything with a book in my hands. However, I have changed a little since that party. I've become bolder or something. I even got a bottle of wine from Mallory and prepared it for our party. Mallory tried to get me to tell her who I was going to hang out with, but I didn't say anything. Lily and I had a good chat, sitting in front of the fireplace in the living room, discussing everything in the world, tactfully avoiding exams. I don't remember who mentioned the topic of relationship and boys first. We started talking about it. I confessed to my new friend that the previous one had taken my first kiss. Lily blushed charmingly as she looked away, and it seemed to me that I was embarrassing her with my first kiss. I wanted to take a little initiative for the first time in my life, so I leaned over too little, like Hilary Duff, Lily, and kissed her. Without even asking permission, although we usually didn't even hug. I liked the way the kiss felt. Lily was much more gentle and pleasant than the pushy Mallory. Perhaps that's why it wasn't just one kiss. It happened then, and I will never forget that night. My knees were shaking, and I even started crying at one point. Lily sobbed and laughed at once, but she turned out to be so sensitive and caring that I literally melted with love for her. We were so tired, not so much from the sex itself, but from the acuteness of our own experiences, that we barely made it to my room. The path through the corridor was endless on our wobbly legs, and we went to sleep in the same bed. We woke up side by side, and at first, I was afraid to open my eyes. No, I found the strength to ask Lily to leave. She obeyed and only kissed my hand tremulously. As soon as the house was empty, I felt the last of my emotions shaken out of me. I thought about everything for a really long time, even forgetting about my studies. I just didn't have any strength left. When my mother came home and found an empty wine bottle and hickeys on my neck, she made such a fuss that I almost died of fright right there. My mother never yelled at me like that, using third-degree methods. Slaps, cigarette burns in the face, and screams in the ear. She found out that I was at a party with Mallory and immediately blamed her for everything. I heard a lot of new things about myself, that I was a liberal scum, and that I allowed myself sodomy, and that I had disappointed her, and that she would never forgive me. I was literally sick of my mother breathing in my face, and the lump in my throat was impossible to swallow. I swear I tried to argue with her, but it took all my strength to hold back the tears. The red marks on my mother's hands burned on my cheeks, and my lips still tingled from Lily's kiss. But I only allowed myself to cry when Mom let me go into the room, taking away the phone and promising to kill me if this happens again, and the daughter of the devil or whoever punks worship would appear near our house. Both Lily and Mallory called me, and I heard them, but I couldn't answer them. I somehow managed to hold out for a few days before the exam, but as soon as I went to school and sat down at the table, I saw Mallory's narrow back in a black t-shirt in the next row, and Lily's slumped shoulders not far from her, and the tears came out of me like a fountain. Mallory volunteered to take me to the nurse, and we had our first serious conversation on the way. I never thought that my friend could utter such words, and that the words were addressed to me, and no one else. I, in turn, confessed to her what had happened that night, and it was obvious that hurt my jealous friend, but she tried not to show it. In the nurse's office, she told me straight out that she had always liked me, and that she had hoped that our kiss would encourage me to do more. And it encouraged. Only alas, not to her, but she's happy for us. And right there in the nurse's office, I realized that it was time to change something in life. For the first time, I didn't care about exams. Spoiler, I passed them brilliantly anyway. Instead, I was dizzy with a new crush. At graduation, Mallory got her high school diploma with poor grades and made an obscene gesture to everyone who messed up her school life. And there she got down on one knee in front of me and loudly invited Lily and me to live with her in her rented apartment near my college. So to speak, in close quarters, but with love. You should have seen the face of my mother, who at the same moment jumped up from her seat and began to utter curses. Yes, school security was forced to remove her from the event. I never saw her again. And even my things were taken away from my home by Mallory and Lily. Yesterday, Lily and I went to the rock store that Mallory now runs and picked out posters for the house. Our house, where I live with both my best friends, one of whom is my first and most true love. Did you like my story? Then subscribe to our channel, put likes, click on the bell. We will be happy to have new subscribers. See you in new stories.
Hello, I'm Alex. Have you ever doubted yourself? Have you ever wondered if you're an extrovert or an introvert? If you're a bad person or a good one? If you're a man or a woman? Oh, are you sure about that? And I wasn't so lucky. Watch this video to the end and find out how much fun it is to be a hermaphrodite. I was lucky to be born a true hermaphrodite, having both male and female genders at the same time. Although, let's not use outdated terms. Better call us intersex people. Doctors offered all sorts of terrible operations when I was a baby, but my parents were strongly against it. They were even complained about to the guardianship, but they confidently replied, "When he grows up, he will decide what to cut off and what to sew on." Thank you, Mom and Dad. In infancy, I had no problems because of my features. Quite the opposite. Since my childhood, I was considered almost a true angel. This began to occur when I started playing with other children. They literally listened to me. Wishing to please me and afraid to upset me, people around me literally fulfilled my every wish. I didn't understand it when I was a little girl, but then I grew up and realized my superpower. I could get anything. What would you want with that kind of power over people, huh? I decided to make the people around me slaves to my whims, and my games were strange. Both boys and girls were happy to welcome me in their company, so I could choose who to be friends with today and who to be friends with tomorrow. So I came up with a game for boys, fighting and pinning each other down, and one game for girls, car driving down the pits. Although the other children didn't understand my games, they enjoyed playing them. Well, and I got not exactly childish pleasure from them. This could not last long. My parents took me to the doctors. I don't like doctors, ugh. It turned out that I had hormonal disorders that made me behave not like a child, and my pheromones attracted people like flies. So much for power. My parents were again told that they would have to choose which therapy to perform, as a boy or as a girl. And we settled on a therapy for boys. The hormones had subsided, but not too much. I lied to my doctors and parents, and I had a lot of fun when I was alone. But all of a sudden, one day I looked at myself in the mirror and realized my breasts started to grow. The last thing I wanted to do was go back to the doctors, so I tried to hide them. I did not change my image too much and continued to look like a boy, not paying attention to my breasts. I lasted almost 6 months before I got a doctor's appointment. Stupid cold. Of course I was discovered. It turned out that, as before, the two reproductive systems in me could not decide which was more important. I had breasts from the first, and hairiness from the second, and my constant delays in the shower. And again, I needed to choose something. I was tired. As time went on and the hormones were hitting my head hard, I couldn't resist them anymore. I asked the most beautiful high school girl out on a date. I was ready to hear no, but To my surprise, Kimberly smiled and said, "Okay, why not?" We had an unforgettable evening, and then another one, and more. From kissing, we quickly moved on to what my hormones craved. Kimberly was surprised to find out that I had breasts and something else, but that didn't stop her from becoming a passionate lover. Kimberly, she did things to me that made me crazy. She loved both my male and female sides while keeping my secret. I fell in love with her, but I still couldn't admit it to her. And when I was almost ready, Kimberly went off to college, leaving me alone. She promised to come back, but I knew better than to believe and hope blindly. We didn't have time to really build a relationship. The time passed too quickly. I knew in my heart that Kimberly would meet the man of her dreams in college and forget me. Kimberly wrote to me every day in social networks. I read her enthusiastic texts and realized that she was happy there without me. So soon she would understand that she did not need me. Don't they say that first love is forever? Do you remember your first love? Are you still together? I couldn't forgive her for having fun while I was suffering. And I decided that I would have fun too. Even more so, the hormones were still there. I met different guys and girls. Sometimes I thought that the flame of love was about to break out, but it was just passion. I soon learned how to go from first base to fourth in just one night. I thought it would help me spark a new love. But my heart was busy. I still loved Kimberly, and I didn't want her to hear about my adventures. But there would have been something to tell. My adventures each time crossed the line. My parents were worried about me, but it only made me angry. Stupid parents, stupid doctors, stupid illness. Maybe if I was normal, Kim wouldn't have left. But one day, when I woke up again with strangers in the same bed, I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. I ran away from there, came home, and threw a tantrum. I just missed my girlfriend. I didn't want to go that far. I kept thinking about Kimberly, my favorite girl, my other half, and my soulmate. I stopped answering messages a long time ago, and Kimberly stopped texting me. I realized that a simple message with a confession would not be enough. I decided to take a desperate step. Get to her right in the middle of the school year, declare my love, and offer to become a couple. I took the bus that evening so that I would be there by the morning. The campus turned out to be a vast place full of young people. Yes, now I understood the reason for Kimberly's delight. I wandered around for hours looking at passers-by in search for her, and all of a sudden, Kimberly, beautiful as ever, stood near the trees and laughed with the girls. I ran to her and hugged her tight. Kimberly had only time to sigh, and I was already in full tears. I whispered in her ear, I love you, I'm sorry, I missed you." And then, suddenly, I was roughly dragged away. I looked up and saw one of the guys from the Brotherhood, which I was with not so long ago. He said, "What do you want from my girlfriend, boy?" I realized that he didn't recognize me as a boy. I was furious. "From your girlfriend? This is my girlfriend!" I shouted, and hit him in the jaw with all my heart. The guy fell. Kimberly grabbed my arm and pulled me away. She led me around the corner and gave me a big kiss. She was thrilled. Later, she told me that this asshole wouldn't leave her alone since the beginning of the year, and I did not know about that, having stopped reading her messages. But now she was sure he would leave her alone. After all, she had a boyfriend who was ready to protect her. In a world of assholes and louts, Every girl needs a protector, and for love's sake, that protector will be me. Although this does not mean that I have ceased to be a girl and love purely female things, if you know what I mean. But who am I? But only God knows. Let the doctors worry about it. But I'm fine as it is. What are you willing to do for love? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss new stories.
Hi, my name is Vanessa and I'm 16 years old. Tell me, have you ever regretted where you were born and who your parents were? Would you have liked to have a choice before you were born? I'd give anything for that. A lot of people are unlucky in life, and I've been unlucky since I was born. Watch this video to the end and you will learn how after being born into a poor family, you can become the president of your country. I was born in a very poor family. My parents barely had enough to eat, so they spent all their time at work. My mother was a cleaner at a local hospital for the poor, and my father was a parking attendant at a supermarket. There was no money for school, so I was entrusted with the upbringing of my younger brother. We lived in a poor neighborhood, and it seemed that everyone was happy with everything except me. People didn't want to change anything and were content with what they had, and that made it even worse. My peers did not want to learn. They just wandered around the street doing nothing and engaged in petty theft. That's why I didn't have much contact with them. And I spent all my free time reading books that I found in a landfill and watching news and political programs on TV. I had always been interested in that. Therefore, I try to understand the topic so that one day I would stand in power and change inequality in society. My younger brother, Richard, didn't share my love of politics and change. I kept telling him not to mess with the bad guys, but Richard never listened to me and joined a local gang of hooligans. When one gets everything and you get nothing? One day, the police called us and told us that he was at their station. When we got there, we found him sitting behind bars. He didn't want to tell us what happened, but the police officer told us. It turned out that his so-called friends persuaded him to help with the theft of a phone. When an expensive car was passing by, they pretended that one of them had been run over. And while the driver was figuring out what was going on, Richard had to steal the phone from the car. But the driver understood and caught Richard, and his friends ran away. The police let my brother go, but my parents had to pay all the money we had. I was incredibly angry with my brother. I warned him. He knew how difficult life was for us. So when he came to apologize, I turned away from him and decided not to talk to him anymore. Let him live as he liked if he didn't listen to my advice. It was evening. As always, I was watching a political program when I suddenly heard my parents talking. Neighbors had already given the second child to an orphanage because there was nothing to feed them with. It was cruel to the child. Why couldn't he live with his parents? And why wouldn't anyone give them some money so they could get their children back? It was at this moment that I heard the president's speech on the news. She announced a competition for aspiring journalists. It was necessary to write a socially significant article on one of the most important topics of our time. And the best part was that anyone could participate. I knew immediately that I had to participate. Finally, I would be able to prove myself, achieve something, and get out into the world. And most importantly, the winner would receive a monetary reward. This meant that I could move to a nicer neighborhood and start my life with a clean slate. I decided to write an article on social inequality. The deadline was 1 month, so I threw myself into the work. My parents couldn't keep track of my brother because of work, so they told me not to fill my head with useless articles and dreams, but to help around the house. It made me angry. How could they think so narrowly? I told them that working for a penny was useless and we needed to act decisively if we wanted to change something. A month passed. I gave up on them, on my brother, on the house, and I was busy with my article all the time. During this time, the neighbors gave another child to a shelter, and this was the last straw. I finally decided that I could no longer stay in this terrible place, and in my head, I already imagined a nice house, nice neighbors, and a refrigerator full of food. When I finished the article, I went to the admissions office to submit it for review. I could have used a computer, but I didn't have one. And there, it turned out terrible. To participate in the competition, you didn't just need to submit an article, we needed to go public with it, with a witness. I used the case of Richard as an example in my article, so he could be the only witness. But I hadn't spoken to him in over a month. During this time, he began to communicate with those guys again and completely went out of hand. But I decided to try. I went up to him and asked him to be my witness. But instead of helping, I got a conviction. He became indignant and thought that I wanted to tell everyone about his shameful crime. But it was his own fault, wasn't it? What difference would it make if he embarrassed himself or not, if it helped me? When he heard this, he took offense and ran away from home. Have you ever used your loved ones for your own purposes? I had been looking for him for days, but to no avail. Desperate, I decided to go to the police for help. And when I got there, I saw a terrible picture. My brother was back in prison. But this time, he was bruised and covered in blood. Terrified, I grabbed the bars and asked what had happened. But he sat in a corner and said nothing. Then the police officer said that Richard tried to steal equipment in a household store, but the guards caught him and beat him. I begged the captain to let my brother out, but the captain said, no money, no freedom. All I could do was go home. And there was an unexpected surprise waiting for me. My article was approved and I made it to the final, which was today. I immediately ran to the contest. On the way, I realized that I was in my beggar's clothes with disheveled hair and not washed. When I got there, I tried to clean myself up, but it didn't get any better. There were rich kids in the competition, and they made me look like trash. It was my turn. I went to the podium and started reading my article. I was ashamed of the way I looked and the fact that my only witness was sitting in the police station, so I tried not to look in the crowd. I didn't want to see people judging and laughing at me. I felt so sorry for myself that I couldn't stand it and decided to just tell my life story. About a poor family, about neighbors, about a brother in prison. I didn't care about the contest anymore. I just wanted to talk. After finishing the story, the audience stood up and began to applaud me for a long time. And in the end, I won because I spoke from the heart and noticed what others did not notice. After all, unlike others, I knew firsthand about social inequality, so the topic was very close to me. After receiving the money, I immediately ran home. Along the way, I imagined packing up, moving to another area, buying a house there, going to university, and how my life became beautiful. But when I entered the house, I saw my parents sobbing with grief. My brother urgently needed surgery. During the beating, he got a concussion and blood got into his brain. But we already spent all the money on buying him out the first time. So the only way out was to move out of the apartment on the street and give the money for rent to the operation. At that moment, I realized that how could I change the whole world if I couldn't deal with problems in my family and neighborhood? So I gave part of the money to get my brother released for treatment in the hospital, and I gave the other part to the neighbors to take their children, making them promise that they would find work and feed their sons. I was back in the same position as I was in the beginning. without money or changes. But I wasn't going to give up. I gathered all my peers and asked them to help clear the area of garbage so that it did not look like a garbage dump. It was the only thing I could do. Surprisingly, the kids agreed. We spent a whole week doing it with the sweat of our brows. A local newspaper noticed this and wrote an article about how poor teenagers helped the state on their own initiative. So the authorities found out about our activities and allocated money for work. After this article, the kids started calling me our president. That's when I realized that to fix the whole world, you first need to start with yourself and your environment. After all, they are the world that surrounds me. I took care of my brother's upbringing and offered him and his gang to clean up garbage in the area for a small fee, so that they would not even have thoughts of stealing. They agreed with pleasure because they had never been paid before. I was invited to work as a journalist for a local student newspaper. They read the article that I prepared for the contest and they liked it very much. So now, I will earn money and help my family. If you like the video, please like and subscribe to our channel. And remember to start small.
Hello everyone, my name is Holly and I have just turned 17. What was the worst mistake you ever made? Did you lie to somebody? Did you set a friend up? Maybe you stole something from a store? My mistake was much worse. Watch this video to the end and find out how I gave birth long before my 18th birthday in prison. Many of my friends have overly caring folks, but my parents went too far. My father walked me to the school entrance, met me back, and didn't let me go out with the girls after school. My mother, however, was no better. She rummaged through my things, forbade me to talk on the phone for more than half an hour, and strictly watched what time I went to bed. This is what a real dictatorship looks like. Of course, I wanted adventures, at least some. I repeatedly tried to break these stupid established rules, but they always took it out on me. They didn't beat me, no, but they deprived me of my phone, internet, even my TV. I knew that sooner or later I would put an end to it, and on my 16th birthday, when my friends were allowed in for only half an hour, I firmly decided that I had to leave this family one way or another. I took the entire amount of money, which I had saved a lot for all the years of gifts for excellent grades, wrote goodbye to my parents, changed my SIM card, and rushed forward towards a cool and bright life. I never felt as high in my life as I did when I was standing at a bus stop for the first time in my life, not knowing where I was going. What was your first teenage riot like? Do you remember how you felt then? I was lucky with the route. A station chosen at random led me to a folk club, where I met a wild girl named Namju. She was looking for a friend to rent a room with her in a funky skyscraper with access to the park, and I'm like, hey, you found her! Everything went well. Namju and I moved into a huge room on the top floor of a skyscraper near the deer park. Namju loved to party and knew so many different places in our city that I didn't even know about. She introduced me to cool people, my circle of acquaintances grew wider and wider, my phone memory couldn't stand it. And then she set me up with Hank. He wasn't the weirdest of our bohemian bunch of total buggers. He even seemed to have studied and had some kind of ambition in taking care of capybaras, counting stars, the development of sex robots. To be honest, I had no idea where he went to school. He was simple and not at all arrogant. I liked him very much. How easily he got along with the people, and yet he was not an irritating buffoon or flatterer. No, he knew his own worth, and my God, those nipples through my shirt. At one of the parties, we kissed like mad. I had some experience with kissing, but not with tongues, like in kindergarten. And Hank kissed normally like an adult. I'd never thought that kissing could turn you on so quickly, and I was turned on. Let's not pretend that teenagers don't care about sex, okay? It was a beautiful night. I didn't feel any pain or shame. Hank turned me on so well, and then he stroked me so that I couldn't stand it. I suppose you can guess the consequences. I didn't feel bad and I didn't keep a period calendar. I just had strange feelings, and then I put two and two together and went to get a test. Yes, I had this shit. That's the one. I almost went mad. I sobbed, beat against the wall, said that we urgently needed to raise money for an abortion. Namju looked at me like I was crazy and said that children should not be killed. Just take it to an orphanage when you give birth, and that's it. I didn't think it was a good idea. What the hell? I was some kind of trash that bred poverty? But the fact was that for all the horror, for all the panic that had gripped me, I was very afraid of an abortion. After consulting with Namju, we decided that I should go home to my parents. I had no idea how to break the news to them. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Sorry I ran away. I'm pregnant. Is that it? And so it happened. I got home. My mom ran to me. My dad ran to me, all in tears and snot. And I was like, I'm pregnant. Oddly enough, they didn't yell at me. Although they used to raise their voices on any occasion, but now they crouched down, were afraid, began to question me, to wail like old women, and at the General Collective Council decided not to let me go anywhere to protect, nourish, cherish, and let me give birth. I was very moved at that moment, and I knew that I would not leave Pa and Ma anymore, because they hadn't left me. I thought they'd curse me when I got back. But nothing of the kind happened, even though my phone and internet were taken away from me. I left Namju my address, and she came to visit me. Besides TV, it was the only entertainment I had during my pregnancy. She could cheer me up, but she often talked about parties, and to be honest, I wanted to howl at the news. I don't like to stay at home. Yes, as soon as I got out, I did something stupid. But damn it, couldn't I get to the middle? Namju subtly hinted to me that she could help me get out of the garden window, take me to her room for a while, and then bring me home. At first, I hesitated. I had enough adventures. But then, tell me, did you break your promise to your parents? Only honestly? So I decided that I could afford to drink soda at a party and nothing would happen to me. Namju really helped me out of the garden window in the evening, and then she took me by taxi to the park. I almost cried with joy. God, how I missed it all. Hank's presence was a little dampening, but I didn't care anymore. All the more reason I was going to give up on the baby. I, of course, didn't drink a drop. Even though I didn't want my child, I was not some bitch who would poison him. I just took a glass of Coke and the police came to us. At first, we didn't understand what had happened. Namju tried to talk with them, saying that we had a pregnant woman in the company. She was silenced by the fact that she was supplying alcohol to minors, including a pregnant woman. I just didn't know what to say or how to react to it. I begged not to take me, but no one listened to me. They put me in a separate cell, and I started calling my parents. Good luck to them, I thought, because my parents turned off the sound at night. And then I realized that I needed luck because it meant that no one would take me. I started crying, and Namju shoved me a sweater and I sat on it in the corner. All of a sudden, I felt bad. Very bad. Not like when you're sick after a party, but like it started. The kids were shouting from their cells, asking questions. I couldn't stand it and shouted out loud. I couldn't stand the pain. Everyone around me started running, yelling, calling for the doctor, calling for the guard, calling for help. Finally, the doctor on duty came running. I was no longer able to get to the hospital, and I had to deliver a baby on the spot. The baby was stuck. It couldn't be turned the right way, and I could feel it in every cell of my skin. I was given painkillers, but I was in too much pain to be fully affected by them. But I survived. How? I don't understand. When the baby was taken out of me, I was exhausted and broken. Namju told me that I seemed to say at that moment, "That's it, I'm going to sleep," and then fell into a dream. I'm willing to believe it because I don't remember anything about that moment at all. I woke up in the hospital. My parents came to see me. The police, the guardianship authorities, in general, almost the entire population of the earth crowded into my small room. They asked me, "Holly, you're going to raise your child, aren't you? Or do you want to give him away? What will be your next decision?" And I don't know what to say. I was led to a transport box where a baby was wrapped in a bottoms bodysuit and sliders. I was not moved by this picture. I just wondered what he was like. I tried to imagine myself with this baby, dragging a stroller, not sleeping at night because of the baby's screams, and I, oddly enough, succeeded. Yes, I quite saw myself in this role. But did that mean I was really ready? And the answer was expected from me here and now. What should I tell them? Let's try it. Anyway, it all turned out to be much more difficult than I expected. I was looked after by the guardianship authorities as a minor mother. If someone felt bad, me or my daughter, they would find Becky a new family. But so far, we managed. And I'm not looking for new adventures yet. What do you say? Subscribe to our channel and like the video so that other viewers will see it, and let only pleasant surprises happen to you. Hi, my name is Amelia and I'm 22. Have you ever suspected someone of lying and wanted to expose them? Watch the rest of this video and find out how I spied on the nanny through a hidden camera and what I saw on the recording. 2 years ago, I gave birth to a son, Nick, from my husband, Kyle. He is 23, we have been living together for 3 years, and Kyle is almost the same as our baby, just as helpless. All day long, he sits at home at the computer and writes his programs. He does not know how to cook or take care of his son. He wears the same t-shirts for weeks, sometimes forgets to wash and brush his teeth. From his appearance, you would think that he is a homeless person and not a leading programmer in a large IT company. I took care of my son and my husband. It was exhausting. And then my boss gently hinted that it would be better for me to get out of my degree to work and prepare a financial report for the whole year. My head was spinning. I didn't want to leave my boys at home alone, but I was also afraid of losing my job. And I had to get back to the office a little earlier. At first, when I came home from work, my hair stood on end. The apartment was in complete chaos. My son was all in pain, hungry and crying. My husband was sitting at the computer and did not see what was happening under his nose. I didn't have the energy left for them, so on the advice of a friend, I hired a nanny. Debbie, she was 18. Have you ever used a nanny or carer? At first, I was worried that a stranger would be in the house. How would she take care of my son? Because she was so young. But after the first week of her work, I calmed down. Nick was smiling, clean, and well-fed. And Kyle even started to look neat. Perhaps he was ashamed of wearing a dirty t-shirt in front of a guest. I let out a little breath and went back to work, but over time, I started noticing strange things. A month later, my son began to meet me with tears. I asked Debbie what was wrong. She said he was just teething. I wanted to believe her, but I had my doubts. It seemed that Nanny wasn't always honest with me. My husband also started behaving strangely. He not only combed his hair every morning, but also shaved, which he never did, even for me. I came home once to find that our entire bed in the bedroom was crumpled and strewn across the bed, even though I had made it up before I left. And that night, when I wanted romance and love, Kyle was colder than ever. He said he was tired and fell asleep with his back to me. I was offended. I kept thinking that Kyle was ignoring me for a reason. Maybe he had a crush on the nanny and was having an affair with her, and he was not interested in me anymore.
I was wondering how I could figure out what was going on while I was at work. I went to Debbie's social media profile page to see if she had a boyfriend, and I saw a bunch of photos with guys much older. My husband was exactly her type. I was beginning to worry that Debbie was hitting on Kyle in my absence. I shared my suspicions with a friend, and she advised me to put cameras in the house to understand what was happening behind my back. I never cheated on my husband. We shared everything. I decided to tell him about the cameras and see how he reacted. If Kyle supported me, then he had nothing to hide, and I had made up my mind. But my husband's reaction alarmed me. When he heard about the cameras in the bedroom and living room, he was categorically against it, saying that it was a violation of the right to privacy. Why did he want to protect the rights of the nanny? He definitely had something to hide. I didn't expect such a reaction from my husband and began to fear that he was cheating on me with Debbie. I couldn't ask directly, but I might have been wrong. And I had no choice but to set up a hidden camera without Kyle's knowledge. Look where I ended up. But I didn't want to be deceived. I had to. After I put the camera up while my husband was sleeping, I went to work and was restless all day. I was afraid Kyle would find that camera and make a scene. Then I started to worry that if I was right and Kyle was cheating on me, then now he was tumbling with Debbie in our bed in front of our son. I couldn't wait for tonight, to come home and watch this recording. When I got home from work, a worried Debbie stopped me in the living room and told me she had something to tell me. She had a guilty shock. A conscience must be a terrible thing. She was sitting with my son and sleeping with my husband. I would feel really guilty too. I couldn't wait to watch the tape, so I asked Debbie to postpone the conversation. I wanted to expose her and Kyle, to throw them out in disgrace. Have you ever suspected your boyfriend or husband of cheating? I rushed into the bedroom, got my camera from the closet, closed it, and started looking, and what I saw made me angry. In the video, Kyle entered the room in a bathrobe, turned on the music, and slowly began to take off his robe. Under it, he was completely naked, and then he dropped the robe on the dresser and covered the camera lens. I couldn't see anything further, but I could hear it perfectly. A girl appeared in the bedroom and began to compliment Kyle. Then they plopped down on the bed, she started laughing and then loudly and quickly breathing, and then it all ended with her moans. Everything became clear to me. Kyle and Debbie had a great time together while I was working. I was ready to kill them. I gave birth to Kyle's son, took care of both of them, and he traded me for this girl. Traitor. I wish there had been an image. I would have shown them their home video to see their reaction. It wasn't the first time Debbie had done this. Who knows whose husband she seduced before? The nanny should have been put in her place. But I didn't have any real proof that it was Debbie's voice. Then I decided to catch them red-handed, catch them at the most inopportune moment, to throw them both out. The next day, I left work early so that I could get home for dinner, when I was definitely not expected. I entered the house and was startled. A tearful Debbie sat in the living room with Nick, playing a game of Meccano. The baby was fine. I asked Debbie what happened, and then she burst into tears and said she couldn't hide it from me anymore. I told Debbie coldly and sternly that I knew, that I didn't need her to tell me everything, and asked where Kyle was. Debbie's mouth dropped open and she pointed to the bedroom. I wish I could have found them there together. But now I had Debbie's confession, which was enough to break up this circus to hell. I walked into the bedroom with a triumphant air and just froze. My Kyle was lying on the bed completely naked, and next to him was my laptop, from which came the same female voice I'd heard on the recording. I looked at the monitor. There was a naked girl who saw me and immediately turned everything off. Kyle jumped in surprise and started dressing abruptly. I was furious. I grabbed my laptop and threw it with all my might. Kyle was confused and said that I shouldn't be so nervous and frighten our son. I had to restrain myself from leaping at him and scratching his face, but for our son's sake, I decided to calm down and listen to my husband. Kyle admitted to having an affair. He met a girl on the internet a couple of months ago and fell in love. This had not happened to him for a long time. He wanted to tell me about it, but did not have time. He knew that he was guilty, but he couldn't help it. I didn't like to hear it. I got up and calmly told him that tomorrow he would not be here. Kyle immediately rushed to collect his things. He didn't even try to change my mind. I was sorry I was wrong about him and my nanny. I left the bedroom, and Debbie ran up to me with a sympathetic look and told me that we were a very good couple and it was painful for her to watch my husband cheat on me. She cursed herself for not saying it as soon as she noticed it. She was a good girl. What would I do without her? When Kyle went to live with his mistress, I was left alone with Nick, and Debbie started spending even more time with us, and we even became friends. She took care of my son like a little brother. I did not regret hiring her. I trusted her. At that time, I had made a big mistake and had trusted the wrong person. But one way or another, I got rid of the toxic person and attracted a new, bright person into my life. If you like my story, please like and subscribe to my channel. Have a good day. Let only honest and decent people surround you.